which is a modest first step to try to gain control of the border. You would think with the president's approval rating being in the dumpster as it is, that they might want to reach out or engage or at least have a conversation, maybe even pretend like they're concerned about what's happening at the border. But we're hearing absolutely nothing from them. And so I'm left with the conclusion that simply stated that the Biden administration, including the president and the vice president and everyone who serves in the Biden administration, simply does not care. They don't care about the migrants who die en route to the United States. They don't care about the young girls and women who are sexually assaulted. They don't care about our border communities that are overrun with this humanitarian crisis, and they simply don't care about the Americans who died last year as a result of drug overdoses from drugs coming across the southwestern border. I know that sounds like a harsh assessment, but I don't know how you would reach any other conclusion based on the facts. Senator Cruz.
So this weekend, John Cornyn and I brought 7 senators down to the southern border. I've been to the border many, many times over the past decade, and it is the worst I have ever seen it right now. We are in the midst of the worst illegal immigration in 62 years. This is not an accident. This was the result of political decisions by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to open up the borders. And the result is tragic. First thing we did when we arrived, we went out on a midnight patrol with the Border Patrol. You don't have to hunt for people crossing illegally. Within minutes, we encountered the first group. And it's a steady stream every minute of every hour of every day coming across the border. The second group we encountered was about a dozen, mostly women and children. In that group was 2 7-year-old girls, each of whom was an unaccompanied minor. Their parents weren't there. They had no family members. They were not sisters. They were 2 7-year-old girls all alone with a group of strangers who had been transported by violent drug cartels. The Border Patrol showed us a patch of grass about 100 yards from where we were standing, where just a couple of weeks earlier, 2 other little girls, 5 and 6 years old, had been violently raped. The Border Patrol had to come and provide medical attention to those little girls who faced horrific mistreatment at the hands of the cartels. These cartels are making billions of dollars every month. Every single illegal immigrant who comes across must pay the cartels anywhere between $3,000 and $12,000. When they come across, they're wearing colored wristbands. We saw the wristbands by the hundreds laying by the shore of the river. Each color corresponds to how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. So these teenagers arrive in America. The Biden administration ships them to every city in America. And they are in debt to violent drug cartels, thousands of dollars. So you have teenage boys working for the cartels in your city. And if you don't live in the border, you might think, the open border is not my problem. Whatever city in America you live in, there are illegal immigrants in debt, thousands of dollars for the drug cartels, working for the drug cartels in your city and committing crimes. And the boys have it better than the girls. The young girls who come in owing thousands of dollars, many of them are forced into sex slavery, forced into a living nightmare. The Border Patrol agents told us about something this trip that I had never heard of before. It's something they call a rape tree. That the cartels bring immigrants across the border and they violently rape them here in the United States. And then they hang their underwear on the tree as a trophy and as a taunt to law enforcement that you can't do anything to stop us. We met with landowners who showed us photographs of illegal immigrants they find on their farms and ranches dead over and over and over again, abandoned by these violent criminals. Just weeks ago, 53 illegal immigrants died in a tractor trailer in San Antonio, including a child who was 13 years old. Last year, we had over 100,000 overdoses in the United States as fentanyl floods this country, and the Biden body bags keep building up and up and up. We've all seen the misery. I have a question for you. Why hasn't Joe Biden gone to the border? Why hasn't Kamala Harris gone to the Rio Grande Valley? Why haven't most of the Democratic senators bothered to go down and see it? And the answer is you cannot see what is happening there and defend it. It is indefensible, the misery, the suffering, the death. And the reason Joe Biden doesn't go to the border is when he goes, he knows that it will bring the folks in this room. It'll bring reporters. It'll bring TV cameras. And Joe Biden is counting on the corporate media ignoring the death and suffering and misery. I'm here to encourage you, don't ignore it. This is not humane, it's not compassionate, it is cruel, it is vicious, it is evil, and it is deliberate. My final point, yesterday, Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, held a press conference saying New York City needs help to deal with the massive influx of illegal immigrants. Last weekend, the mayor of D.C. went on national television and said, please stop sending so many illegal immigrants to Washington, D.C. The city can't bear the burden. If bright blue Democratic cities like New York City and Washington, D.C. cannot handle the human consequences and tragedy of Joe Biden's open borders, how do you think South Texas is doing? How do you think Laredo is doing? How do you think McAllen is doing? How do you think Del Rio is doing, or Eagle Pass? This is horrific. It is a crisis. It is man-made. It is political, and it needs to stop. Senator John Ross.
When it comes to the southern border, Joe Biden is missing in action. For all of us, this was not our first trip. It would be the first trip for Joe Biden as president if he were to go. We all found this the most disturbing of all of the times we've been to the border, because we saw the crises. We saw the crime crisis, the humanitarian crisis, and the national security crisis. We also went to thank the Border Patrol. Those men and women are working day and night, and the President of the United States is quick to criticize them and condemn them for doing their job. We were there to thank them for what they're doing. As Ted mentioned, we went on midnight patrol, group after group after group of illegal immigrants. And day after day, night after night, that's what the Border Patrol is facing along the southern border, and they are being overwhelmed. And you ask them, is there a policy that has made it so bad? When you take a look at the Biden's border crisis, the numbers before and the numbers after Biden took office, what is the difference? Why did it jump so high? It's a policy of the Biden administration called catch and release. And it's not too easy to keep, if you are using a catch and release policy, people are willing to get caught because they know that they will be able to be released in the United States. And as Ted said, they will then flood the border with those who are willing to be caught on one area, so another area is available for the gotaways to get into the country. And the numbers are astonishing. What, 3 million have been interacted with, another million gotaways vanished into America. And it's not just the number of individuals, it is the crime that comes with it. As a doctor, I've seen the impact of drugs on the American public. The number one cause of death right now in America of adults under the age of 45 is a drug overdose, often related to fentanyl. And you may have seen the picture of the amount of fentanyl that was seized just last Friday. What we know is for everything that is being seized by the border agents in its massive amounts, they believe much, much more gets through. And that's why we're looking at over 100,000 Americans died last year alone of drug overdoses. And the money from all this is incredible. That is what is funding the crime, the cartels, the gangs. How much money? Well, when we did the calculations with the border agents, the amount of money, the profit that the cartels and the drug gangs are making in a given week is more than the budget of our Border Patrol over the course of a year. It's not surprising that they're being overwhelmed. But no, Joe Biden's not going to go there, and I'll tell you why. He needs to go. He needs to see what chaos he has brought to this country and the crime that's come with it. He needs to see and listen to the Border Patrol, who will tell them, he'll tell the president what would actually work, what would stop this problem. But he doesn't want to go, as Ted said. He knows the national media will follow him, and then he will no longer be able to hide from the crime and the crisis that his dereliction of duty has brought to this country.
Well, I want to thank Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz for, again, taking us down to McAllen. We actually made that trip about a year ago. I'd been, additionally, this is actually my third trip just in the last year. And it's kind of amazing. When we were in McAllen, and on all these trips, we're trying to call attention to what's going on at the border. Because we firmly believe that if Americans understand what's going on, they will demand that this administration, the Biden administration, put a stop to it, that they change their policies. And that's what we're after. That's what we're after. That's what needs to happen. When we were down there a year ago, the Customs and Border Protection told us that there were people coming in from 50 different countries. 50 different countries. A year later, they're saying 150 different countries. They told us just last week, people are coming not just from South America, Central America, Cuba, and so forth. They're coming from 150 different countries. And the Biden administration says, oh, they're securing the border, they're enforcing border security. That's absolutely not true. It is an open border. I've also been to Mexico, to Ecuador, to Colombia, to Guatemala. They know that if they come, they're getting in. They know it. They know it's an open border. And look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. Last month, over 200,000 encounters with people crossing the border illegally. 200,000 encounters. That doesn't even take into account the gotaways. The people that the Border Patrol doesn't find, they come across. That's in addition to those 200,000. So that's the month. Where are we for the year? Year to date, more than 1.7 million encounters with people crossing the border illegally. More than 1.7 million. What's it going to be for the full year? Well over 2 million. 2 million. And that doesn't count the gotaways. That doesn't count the really bad folks that are sneaking across and are not encountered by the Border Patrol or Customs and Border Protection. Think what that means. Think what that means. Senator Cruz just mentioned, now you've got Eric Adams, mayor in New York, going, hey, this is affecting us. You've got Marilyn Bowser here in D.C. say, hey, this is affecting us. You bet it's affecting them in New York, here in D.C. It's affecting every state in this country. The drug bust last week, 1 million fentanyl pills, 1 million fentanyl pills that came across the Mexican border. That's just one drug bust. Human trafficking. Senators here have talked about the toll on people. The people coming across, they don't have $8,000 or $12,000 to pay the cartels or pay the coyotes. So when they come here, they have to pay that off. They're indentured servitude. It's indentured servitude. Crime. And think of the toll it takes on those people coming across, being forced into crime. And then think of the impact in our cities, the impact on Americans all across this country. So then the administration says, oh, well, Biden administration says, oh, well, no, Congress needs to pass a law. We need the tools to secure the border. They need to pass the law. They need to do something. No, the administration needs to enforce the laws they have. They need to enforce the tools they have. We know they work. We've seen them work. We authorized and appropriated funding for a border barrier, for a border wall. People, technology, and a wall. It sits there unfinished. So the Biden administration is paying contractors to not build the wall when it's been authorized and appropriated. Or how about the Remain in Mexico policy, third safe country policy, which they're not enforcing, or even Public Health Order 42, which they're minimally and selectively enforcing. By enforcing those laws, using the tools they have, the authorizations they have, and the funding they have, they could shut down this border right now. Look at the numbers. It was done before, they can do it again. Look at the numbers. You've got Customs and Border Protection, you've got Border Patrol down there, you've got the National Guard, you've got the Texas Department of Public Safety. Everybody's trying to do the job, but they can't do the job because the Biden administration won't let them. Every single American needs to tell this administration, this affects everybody. Border security is national security. And the Biden administration needs to change their policy, their open border policy, now.
First, I do want to thank Senators Cornyn and Cruz for hosting this delegation trip to our southern border. It was invaluable and extremely educational. And I also had visited the border a number of years ago during the Trump administration. You'll find the Republicans, it doesn't matter the administration. We're going to go see when there are issues. But what I saw on this trip was infinitely worse than what I saw several years ago. My colleagues have already shared some of the stories and what we witnessed, what Border Patrol agents shared with us, the people that we encountered at the border. I am always so saddened by the rape trees and the treatment of the girls and women as they found their way to our border at the hands of the coyotes, those that are physically and sexually abusing them. And I am going to share another story. There is a department, it's Air and Marine Operations within Border Patrol. They are the ones that took us up in Black Hawk helicopters along their patrol route. And one of the pilots had shared with us that there was a 2-day period where they were searching for the body of a toddler that had been left behind by the toddler's mother. So the toddler's mother had told the agents when she was doing her intake that she had had to leave her toddler behind. And she gave them an approximate location of where that toddler would be located. And they searched for 2 days and were unable to find the body of that child. This administration continues to encourage these dangerous journeys with their catch and release, open door border policy. We've talked about the drugs, the fentanyl, the methamphetamine that is infecting my Iowa communities. We have talked about the rape of innocent children and women as they engage in this journey. We have talked about the absolutely unnecessary deaths of people making this trip. When is this administration going to wake up and say, stop coming here, don't take this dangerous journey? When are they going to change their policies? Now, while we were standing there at the border, on the river, across the river from us, was a spotter for the cartel. Folks, right across the river from us, a spotter for the cartel. These spotters keep an eye open for the cartels and let them know where Border Patrol agents are, so they know where and when to direct drugs, trafficked human beings, and weapons. I mean, they're over there and they're just taunting us with their presence. And so a bill that I have introduced, and I just did this, and it's something that as Congress we can do, whether the president buys in or not. I hope he does, because we'd love to see the legislation passed. It's the Transnational Criminal Organization Illicit Spotter Prevention and Elimination Act, and it enhances the penalties for these spotters that are abetting our cartels that control the border. So it can increase fines and impose up to a 10-year maximum prison time. Folks, this is just one of a number of efforts that are available by members of Congress out there. We just hope the administration wakes up and understands what a horrible humanitarian crisis we have at the southern border.
Got my own chart.
Looks familiar.
Got my own chart. I'll try not to repeat what many of the things my colleagues have already said. I do want to thank Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz for hosting it. I want to thank the brave men and women of Customs and Border Protection Patrol for their heroic efforts in the face of resistance from the President and the administration. I want to thank you for being here. This gallery should be filled. The border ought to have journalists from every news outlet down there covering this human tragedy, this humanitarian crisis. You know, the numbers just can't convey it adequately. I mean, the number 3.7 million encounters since President Biden took office. We were down there, the sheriffs, the landowners, talking about more than 500 dead bodies last year found in the desert, desiccated, animal chewed. We could show the pictures, but they are horrific. They're on pace for over 700 dead bodies being found this year. You know, we had one of the larger mass murders in America recently. Didn't involve guns. It involved a semi-trailer and the human traffickers, some of the most evil people on the planet. 53 people died, including 3 children, in that mass murder. Where's the news coverage about that? Where's the focus? Why aren't the news media drawing the American public's attention to this humanitarian crisis? One of the reasons I like to use my chart is it shows the history of this. You know, the little blip on the left-hand side, that was 2,000 people per day being encountered. That's what President Obama labeled a humanitarian crisis. I have this chart available. It shows the cause and effect of different policy actions. But you can see that obviously President Trump, for a host of reasons, all of a sudden was in his own crisis. Over 4,000 people per day. Then he fixed it. There were no laws passed. President Trump just fixed it by entering into agreements with Central American countries, with Mexico, the return in Mexico policy. There's a consequence to entering this country illegally. And we pretty well stopped the flow of unaccompanied children, of family units exploiting our laws. Even single adult illegal immigration declined. Until the presidential debates with Democrat presidential candidates said they were not going to deport people, they're going to offer illegal immigrants free health care. And then, of course, President Biden took office, dismantled all those successful programs, and now we're dealing with over 6,000 people per day since President Biden took office. 6,000 people. That's a large caravan every day. The last 4 months, it's been over 7,000 people per day. But again, the numbers don't really describe the tragedy. I mean, as Chairman of Homeland Security, I've been down to the border multiple times. I always see something new. But I'm always profoundly disturbed. You see the pictures, you can see the numbers, but when you're there at midnight and you see a small group containing children, you see a little 6-year-old and a little 7-year-old girl unaccompanied. The human traffickers are putting together this group. You know, fortunately, that group didn't abuse them. But all they have is they've got a little packet, a little plastic bag with their birth certificate and a note card with a number and an address. That's their only connection. They lose that and they are lost. Can you imagine being a parent or a grandparent, turning your 6 or 7-year-old daughters over to some of the most evil people on the planet? Can you imagine that? Why is that happening? It's because President Biden has decided to open our borders. His policies have caused this. This didn't just happen. He's just not unlucky. He's the root cause. His policies are the root cause. And the result of his open border policy, he is facilitating the multi-billion-dollar business model. A back of the envelope calculation after our briefing, I figure it's about $18.3 billion per year. I'd always heard $4 or $5 billion. No, it's much larger, $18.3 billion. It is the multi-billion-dollar business model of some of the most evil people on the planet. I can't even describe some of the horrific treatment that is being carried out by these evil people. So again, when we were down the border, I called on President Biden, Vice President Harris, who, by the way, ought to know better. She was on my committee. She should have heard, or at least her staff should have heard, testimony of how the human traffickers will sell children. One figure was $84 to create a family unit to exploit our laws. But the lesson of this chart is we can fix this. We know how to do it. And of course, this is the first step if we want to establish a functioning legal system, which I want to do. If we want to take care of the DACA kids, fix that problem. The first step is securing our borders. And among many tragedies, that's one of the tragedies of President Biden blowing it all up, is he blew up our opportunity for real immigration reform and a legal system for these people. So again, thank you for coming. Please ask your colleagues in the media.
Why aren't they covering this? Why are they covering up for the Biden administration? Why aren't they telling these stories, these tragedies? Why don't they cover that mass murder with as much gusto as they cover gun crimes? This is thousands of orders of magnitude worse. As horrific as any mass shooting is, this is thousands of orders of magnitude worse a crisis than what the mainstream media actually pays attention to. Start paying attention to it. Start informing the American public. The American public needs to know what is happening on our border and the threat it represents to all of us in terms of national and homeland security. Senator Langford.
Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, thanks for pulling this trip together. Like all of us here, I've been down to the border multiple times. For me, it's a big picture issue that I try to back up and look at it from the perspective of DHS and their responsibility. DHS has the responsibility to be able to help secure our nation. For any one of us, if you came and asked us if we're going to secure our nation, we would begin with things like the crime that's happening in our cities. We'd begin with the drugs that are flowing into our cities. We'd ask the basic question, how do we reduce the impact of transnational criminal organizations? How do we take away the money from transnational criminal organizations? How do we slow down the flow of drugs into our country and contraband? All of us would say a basic form of that strategy would be to stop illegal immigration at the border. That is basic, big strategy in America. That is not happening. I have a very simple question for the President of the United States. Do you want to stop the crime in our country? Do you want to stop the flow of drugs into our country? Do you want to stop illegal immigration in our country? Because of everything that we saw and of all the people that we talked to at DHS along the border, all their instructions include how to make illegal immigration more efficient. From the multiple times that I've been there, my conversation is, how are we stopping this? This is a problem. How are we stopping it? It's like, we're not. This used to take 5 days, and now it takes 3 days. They would tell us our instructions were, this takes too long, so now we have to move this faster. Now people are moving illegally into our country in an 8-hour period. And if you go to the Southwest Border Command Center here in Washington, D.C., they're not just tracking the number of people crossing, they're tracking the efficiency of how they cross. That's the metric that they have on the board, is how fast that they're moving people across the border. Because their focus is not stopping illegal immigration, it's keeping the cameras from seeing a crowd at the border. And so when people cross the border, they move them into the country as fast as they possibly can. Load them into buses as fast as they possibly can. They don't want crowds. They're not trying to reduce the number of people. They're trying to reduce the optics of the number of people. That's what we're facing in this administration, and that's why all of us are so upset about this, is because they're not even trying to enforce the law. They're not even trying. In fact, when I visit with Homeland Security officials, they tell me they have a new strategy that they're working on now. Their new strategy is to do an online asylum process where anyone from anywhere in the world could just sign up for asylum online, and then they could fly into any airport in the United States and then just go through the process from here. Can I remind you, currently there is an 8-year backlog in the asylum system. And they're moving from there's a backup at the border to opening this up to even more people. They're not interested in reducing illegal immigration. They're actively developing plans to make illegal immigration easier and increase the number of people coming into the United States. So when I hear people like the mayor of Washington, D.C., saying they have a homeless problem because they have so many people that are coming here, and when she says they were tricked into coming here, I remind her that it wasn't that long ago she was tweeting out and inviting people to be able to come, saying Washington, D.C. is a sanctuary city. Well, now sanctuary cities in the United States are finding out exactly what that means when they invite people from around the world, because Joe Biden is currently in the process of making America a sanctuary country, inviting anyone from anywhere in the world. We have somewhere, depending on the day, between 5,000 and 8,000 people illegally crossing our border every day now. Currently, with the restraints that the Biden administration has put on ICE, we're deporting about 203 people a day. You do the math on that. 4,000 to 8,000 people a day illegally crossing that we know of into the country, deporting 203. One last comment on this. When we were visiting with people from the ports, people that handle Border Patrol in between the ports, asking them what was actually happening and trying to get the details. Those that actually operate our ports were able to detail to us just this year, just in the Rio Grande Valley, they've interdicted 144 pounds of fentanyl. They've interdicted 27,500 pounds of meth. 27,500 pounds of meth just in the Rio Grande Valley just this year. When I talk to the Bureau of Narcotics in Oklahoma, and we talk about the people that are dying in Oklahoma, they'll say the number one issue is meth coming into our country, and every drug that's on the street now is laced with fentanyl, all of it. And it's killing Oklahomans. But, he said to me, in 2000, we saw the numbers drop off dramatically as the border was enforced. But now that number has skyrocketed, that the border is not being enforced anymore, and the drug numbers are overwhelming my state of Oklahoma. This is a crisis across our nation, and DHS has a job to do. Their Department of Homeland Security, can it not be a strategy for them to reduce illegal drugs in our country, to reduce criminal organizations in our country, to reduce the power and money of cartels into our country, and to reduce illegal activity? That should be baseline, but it is not.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the Bipartisan Border Solutions Act. That's stalled in the House. Is there any other legislation or congressional action that's being considered right now that has the votes to pass the House?
On this topic, well, I think you heard several people mention the catch and release policy. We asked the Border Patrol Union, what is one thing we could do to stop this? And they said they need to be able to detain people who come across the border and then present them to an immigration judge or somebody to make a decision whether they legally qualify for asylum, rather than release them for this 8-year backlog, after which they don't show up. So this is an open invitation to come, and people are coming, and they will continue to come. So that would be the single most effective thing. But first of all, you got to have the political will, and the president apparently and his party have zero political will to try to fix our broken border.
Senator, in 2013, the Comprehensive Immigration Bill that passed the Senate had money for 20,000 border agents, 700 miles of fencing. You were involved in the bipartisan negotiations this week in the negotiating group. Can you talk about how far did you guys get, and do you think that there's any political will to appropriate the same type of money that was appropriated, or almost appropriated in 2013 to keep up border patrol agents and fencing?
Well, the Border Patrol tells us that there are three things that they need. They need people, they need technology, and they need physical barriers. And then I would add to that the fourth thing, they need the political will from on high to actually enforce the law, not to not enforce the law. But Democrats will point back to that so-called comprehensive immigration reform bill that did pass the Senate, but it didn't go anywhere in the House, which means it didn't become law. It didn't get a presidential signature. What we saw instead by President Trump during his administration is he sent a different message. He said a different message: don't come, don't take the dangerous journey, and if you're going to claim asylum, you're going to have to wait for that to be handled while you remain in Mexico. And it's a completely different message. It's one of deterrence. It's not just about enforcing the law, it's actually discouraging people from making the dangerous journey in the first place. So what President Biden and his administration have done is created such a humanitarian and public safety crisis that really what we've done in the past is obsolete. We need to deal with the current crisis before we're going to be able to do anything else, I believe, in the immigration space.
Go ahead.
Given the lack of consensus on the standalone measure, is there any way that you might try to influence and government funding process?
I certainly hope so. We should use every lever we can, and I think if and when Republicans take control of Congress, we're going to see those levers used. I want to show you something, which is when we were on the border, I mentioned that there were these wristbands, these colored wristbands, just laying on the ground, hundreds of them. So I just reached down and picked up one. This one's colored white, this one's green, this one's yellow, this one is white. These correspond to the thousands of dollars that illegal immigrants owed the cartels. This yellow one in particular is quite small. It's worn by a child. It's not cut. The child's hand, she or he was small enough that their hand slipped out from under this. These are the incidents of human slavery. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are responsible for the worst plague of slavery in America since the Civil War. This child, don't think of these as pieces of plastic. Think of these as leg irons worn by slaves, because this is a little child who is starting life owing thousands of dollars to drug cartels and trapped in involuntary servitude. And I would encourage you, thank you for being here. I appreciate the reporters that are here. This is a story that needs to be told. The hell these children are living, Joe Biden could stop it. If you look at this chart, this was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. This is not inevitable. This slavery, this suffering, this assault, this murder is not inevitable. It's the consequences of a political choice, and it's a political choice that is aided and abetted by media silence. I got a haircut this morning. CNN was on in the barbershop. I watched 30 minutes of stories on how it's hot in New York City today. And so people are going to the park and dancing in sprinklers. Okay, I get it's hot. I'm from Houston. It's hot. I get that. But perhaps the same amount of time they devote to the weather could be devoted to the human slavery that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have brought back to America. It's horrific and it's wrong, and the Democrats in the Senate don't give a damn about the people who are suffering.
Thank you.